A German shepherd discovered chained to a rusted pole, crying day and night without stopping. Rescuers believed is emotional. Scars might be too deep to heal. But when one dedicated woman stepped forward, something miraculous unfolded that shocked everyone who witnessed it. Get ready for a story that will transform how you see trauma, resilience, and extraordinary healing power of compassion. The morning air hung heavy with dew as Animal Control Officer Rachel Winters navigated her truck down the narrow country road. The call had come in just after dawn. A German shepherd discovered behind an abandoned property, reportedly in bad shape. Rachel had responded to hundreds of similar calls during her 8 years on the job, but something about the dispatcher's tone suggested this case might be different. As she pulled onto the overgrown driveway, the sound hit her first, a continuous high-pitched crying that made the hair on her arm stand up. Following the haunting noise around the dilapidated farmhouse, Rachel found him, a once majestic German shepherd, now skeletal and filthy, tethered to a concrete post by a 3-foot chain that had worn a bloody ring around his neck. "Hey there, buddy," Rachel whispered, approaching slowly. The dog's crying never ceased, not even to acknowledge her presence. His amber eyes, clouded with fear, stared through her as if she weren't there at all. The chain allowed him barely enough movement to stand and turn around, with evidence suggesting he'd been confined this way for months. Rachel documented everything meticulously: the lack of shelter, the empty food bowl crusted with mold, the water bucket tipped over and dry. When she attempted to touch the dog, he neither growled nor retreated, simply continued that heartbreaking cry while trembling violently beneath her hand. With bolt cutters from her truck, Rachel carefully severed the chain. Freedom elicited no reaction from the dog. He remained rooted to a spot, still crying, still trembling, as if invisible links continued to hold him captive. "You're safe now," Rachel murmured, gently guiding him toward her vehicle. The German shepherd moved mechanically, his legs stiff from disuse, his crying continuous soundtrack to their slow progress. At North Valley Animal Shelter, veterinarian Dr. Marcus Chen worked efficiently, examining the dog while Rachel completed her report. The diagnosis was grim: severe malnutrition, dehydration, heartworm positive, infected wounds, where the chain had rubbed flesh raw, and evidence of previous beatings. "Physically, we can treat him," Dr. Chen explained, "but I'm concerned about his mental state. He hasn't stopped crying once, hasn't responded to any stimulus. Sometimes when they have been broken this thoroughly, they never fully recover." Rachel nodded grimly, watching through the exam room window as technicians carefully cleaned the dog's wounds. The crying continued unabated. "What will happen to him?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The shelter was overcrowded, underfunded, and rehabilitation cases with uncertain outcomes rarely received resources. "We'll do our best, Doctor," Chin replied, the hesitation in his voice confirming Rachel's fears. As she turned to leave, Rachel paused, watching the German shepherd again. Something in those vacant eyes called to her, awakening memories of her own journey through trauma as a child, the years spent rebuilding her shattered sense of safety. "I'll foster him," she said suddenly, surprising even herself, "just until he's stable enough for adoption." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. "Rachel, this won't be an easy case. That cry might not stop for weeks, if ever." Rachel nodded, decision already made. "I know, but everyone deserves a chance to find their voice." Again, they named him Echo for the way his cries reverberated through the shelter halls before Rachel brought him home. Now those same cries filled her modest 2-bedroom house, a constant reminder of wounds too deep to see. The first night, Echo refused to enter the house, collapsing on the porch instead, his body rigid with fear. When Rachel finally coaxed him inside, he immediately retreated to the farthest corner of the living room, pressing himself against the wall as if trying to disappear. His food remained untouched until Rachel left the room. The orthopedic dog bed she'd purchased stayed pristine while Echo slept on the hard floor. Days passed with little improvement. Echo's crying continued without pause, a haunting soundtrack that followed Rachel through her home. Neighbors began to complain about the noise. Friends stopped visiting. At night, Rachel lay awake listening to Echo's distress, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake, thinking she could help him. Give back to the shelter, suggested her brother during their weekly phone call. You've done more than most people would already. Rachel couldn't explain why she refused. Something about Echo's broken spirit resonated with her, reminding her of the frightened child she'd once been, silent in her trauma until someone had finally noticed and reached out. 2 weeks into the fostering, Rachel established a routine. Each morning before work, she sat on the floor 6 feet away from Echo's corner, reading aloud from whatever book she was currently enjoying. Each evening, she did the same, gradually decreasing the distance between them. Inch by inch, Echo's behavior changed in almost imperceptible ways. His crying continued, but sometimes quieted from a wail to a whimper when Rachel read. He began eating while she was still in the room, though he'd stop if she made eye contact. Once she caught him watching her intently from his corner, though he quickly looked away when she noticed at the 4-week checkup, Dr. Chun seemed cautiously optimistic about Echo's physical recovery. The wounds had healed. He had gained 12 pounds, and his coat was beginning to regain its luster. But the crying persisted, earning concerned glances from the clinic staff. Have you considered that this might be his permanent state? Dr. Chen asked gently. Some dogs, like some people, never fully recover from severe trauma. Rachel scratched behind Echo's ears, noticing how he leaned ever so slightly into her touch. Despite his continued crying, he's still in there, she insisted. He just needs to remember who he was before the chain. That night, a violent thunderstorm hit the valley. The crash of thunder sent Echo into a panic, his crying escalating to frantic howls as he paced his corner. Rachel, exhausted from a long workday, felt her own composure crumbling under the strain of his distress. As lightning illuminated the living room, in harsh flashes, Rachel abandoned the professional distance she'd maintained, instead of retreating to her bedroom or following the training manual's advice to ignore Echo's distress. She settled on the floor near his corner. I know you're scared, she whispered, her voice barely audible above his cries and the raging storm. I used to be terrified of thunderstorms, too. Echo continued pacing, his crying on Danish, but Rachel noticed his eyes darting toward her between circuits of his corner. She began talking not about training or commands, but about her own life, her childhood in an abusive home, the foster care system that followed, and her long journey toward healing. When I was 9, she continued, I live a foster family with this enormous willow tree in the backyard. During storms, I'd hide underneath it, even though it was probably the most dangerous place to be. But something about those sweeping branches made me feel protected. The thunder crashed directly overhead, rattling the windows. Echo flinched violently, but to Rachel's surprise, moved several inches closer to where she sat. The thing about chains, Echo, she said softly, is that sometimes we carry them long after they're physically gone. Throughout the night, Rachel continued talking. When her personal stories ran out, she described the places she'd like to take Echo once he felt safer. The dog park by the river, the pet-friendly hiking trails, in the mountains, the beach where dogs had run, unleashed at sunrise. As dawn broke, Rachel realized two bad things simultaneously. She had fallen asleep on the floor, and the house was quiet. Echo had stopped crying. He still huddled in his corner, but his eyes were fixed intently on her face, alert and present, in a way she hadn't seen before. "Good morning," she whispered, afraid any sudden movement might shatter this fragile moment. The crying resumed almost immediately, but something had shifted. A connection, however tenuous, had formed. That evening, Rachel arrived home with a new approach. Instead of trying to make Echo conform to a normal dog's life, she would meet him where he was. She rearranged the living room furniture to create a cozy area around Echo's chosen corner, complete with soft blankets, toys, and his food and water dishes. "This is your safe space," she told him, setting up a small speaker nearby. "No one will force you out of it until you're ready." She began playing classical music at low volume throughout the day, which research suggested could help calm anxious dogs. She established an even more consistent routine, narrating her actions aloud so nothing would startle him. Each day, she sat a little closer to his corner during their reading sessions. 3 days later, Rachel woke at midnight to find Echo standing beside her bed, still crying, but somehow seeking proximity. When she extended her hand slowly, he didn't retreat. Progress isn't linear, she reminded herself, recalling her therapist's words from years ago. At the 6-week checkup, Dr. Chin noted Echo's improved physical condition but remained concerned about the constant crying. It could be partly neurological at this point, he explained, a response pattern so deeply ingrained that his brain can't break the cycle. Then we'll work around it, Rachel replied, watching how Echo now stayed near her in the exam room instead of retreating to the corner. He's finding other ways to communicate. As they left the clinic, Rachel overheard a technician whisper, "That's the crying dog. Don't know why she bothers." Rachel tightened her grip on Echo's leash. "Because everyone deserves someone who won't give up on them," she murmured, though no one but Echo could. Here, the social media post wasn't Rachel's idea. Her colleague Jessica, who volunteered at the shelter on weekends, suggested it after witnessing one of Echo's rare quiet moments during a visit to Rachel's home. "People need to see this journey," Jessica insisted, phone already recording as Echo cautiously accepted a treat from Rachel's palm. A small victory that had taken 7 weeks to achieve. It might help other rescue cases. Reluctantly, Rachel agreed to a simple post on the shelter's account, a before and after photo of Echo along with a brief description of his ongoing rehabilitation. She never expected it to reach beyond the local community. By morning, the post had gone viral. Comments poured in from around the country, some offering encouragement, others sharing similar stories of traumatized dogs, many asking how Echo was progressing. With his constant crying, they connect with his story because it's really about resilience, Jessica explained as she scrolled through hundreds of comments. People see themselves in him. The unexpected attention brought both support and pressure. Donations flowed into the shelter specifically designated for cases like Echo's. A pet supply company sent a package of specialty items designed for anxious dogs. But with visibility came scrutiny. Well-meaning followers asking for daily updates, questioning Rachel's methods, expecting miraculous transformation. "He's not a project with a deadline," Rachel explained to Jessica, declining requests for live videos of Echo's training sessions. "He needs consistency, not an audience." Despite her reservations about the publicity, Rachel couldn't deny that Echo was making progress. The crying continued, but now punctuated by periods of quiet that grew longer each week. He began following Rachel from room to room, still maintaining a careful distance, but clearly seeking her presence. At night, he abandoned his corner to sleep on the rug, beside her bed. Most significantly, he started responding to his name, his ears perking forward. Whenever Rachel called him, his eyes meeting hers, with increasing frequency. 8 weeks into fostering, Rachel received a call that changed everything. A family in Colorado had seen Echo's story and wanted to adopt him. A couple with experience, rehabilitating traumatized shepherds with a spacious rural property and unlimited patience. They seemed perfect on paper, Jessica enthused. Plus, they're not bothered by the crying. They've handled similar cases before. Rachel should have been thrilled. This was the goal of fostering, after all, preparing animals for their forever homes. Yet, as she watched Echo, tentatively exploring the backyard that afternoon, something felt unresolved. Just a few more weeks, she told Jessica. He's making such good progress. I don't want to disrupt it. The truth, which Rachel barely admitted to herself, was more complicated. Somewhere between the sleepless nights and small victories, between reading aloud for hours and celebrating the first time Echo willingly approached her, she had fallen in love with this broken, resilient dog who cried his pain to the world. That evening, as Rachel sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset, Echo did something unprecedented. Without prompting, he settled beside her, his body touching hers from shoulder to hip, and for 5 magnificent minutes, he was completely silent. We've both come so far, Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face, as she cautiously placed her hand on his back. Maybe we were meant to heal together. The first snowfall of winter transformed Rachel's backyard into a wonderland that both terrified and fascinated. Echo, standing at the door, he cried more intensely than usual, his eyes fixed on the strange white blanket covering his familiar territory. It's just snow, Rachel encouraged, stepping outside to demonstrate its harmlessness. Come see. 3 months earlier, Echo would have retreated to his corner at the first sign of something new. Today, after several minutes of anxious crying curiosity, one out, he ventured one paw onto the cold surface, then quickly pulled back. Rachel waited patiently, neither forcing nor coaxing. Eventually, Echo stepped fully into the snow, his crying quieting too. Occasional whimpers as he investigated this strange new phenomenon. When he looked up at Rachel, something resembling playfulness flickered across his face. Go on, she encouraged, tossing a snowball gently across the yard. To her astonishment, Echo bounded after it, awkwardly at first, then with increasing confidence. For one breathtaking moment, as he pounced on the scattered snow, his crying stopped completely. Rachel stood motionless, witnessing the ghost of the dog he must have been before trauma rewired his brain. Inside, warming by the fire, Rachel composed a carefully worded email to the Colorado family who wanted to adopt Echo. She explained his progress, his continuing challenges, and her growing conviction that another relocation might erase the trust they'd painstakingly built. She attached recent videos, showing both his improvements and his ongoing struggles with anxiety and crying. I understand if you prefer a dog further along in rehabilitation, she wrote, her finger hovering over the send button. As doubt crept in, was she making this decision for Echo or for herself? The reply came the next morning, gracious and understanding. They had recently taken in another shepherd in urgent need and agreed that disrupting Echo's progress would be counterproductive. It seems he's already found his person, they concluded. Relief flooded through Rachel, followed immediately by panic. Could she really commit to Echo permanently, accepting that his crying might never fully stop, that his trauma might always shadow their lives in some form? Before she could second guesses herself further, Echo approached with his favorite toy, a purple dragon she'd given him weeks ago that had remained untouched until recently. He placed it cautiously in her lap, then backed away, crying softly as if uncertain of her response. "Thank you," Rachel whispered, tears blurring her vision. That afternoon, they visited Dr. Chun for Echo's regular checkup. The veterinarian marveled at Echo's physical transformation, healthy weight, shining coat, healed wounds, but seemed even more impressed by the behavioral changes. He's maintaining eye contact, seeking interaction, Dr. Chin observed. As Echo leaned against Rachel's leg, the crying has diminished significantly, too. Not gone, Rachel acknowledged. He still cries every day, especially when he's anxious, but it's becoming just one way he communicates, not his only response to the world. Dr. Chin nodded thoughtfully. Some scars never disappear completely. They become part of who we are. He glanced meaningfully at the faded scar on Rachel's forearm, a remnant of her own troubled past that she no longer felt compelled to hide. Spring arrived with explosive, green energy that mirrored the changes in Echo's demeanor. 6 months after his rescue, the German shepherd, who once knew only the length of his chain, now explored the fenced backyard with cautious curiosity, investigated new toys with growing playfulness, and even tolerated brief introductions to Rachel's friends. The crying persisted, but had transformed, no longer constant, no longer reflecting, pure distress. Sometimes he cried when excited about walks, sometimes when uncertain about new situations. Rachel had learned to distinguish the different tones, responding appropriately to each. "It's his language," she explained to Jessica, who marveled at Echo's progress. During her visits, we all expressed trauma differently. What Rachel didn't share, even with Jessica, was her growing concern about her professional future. Her supervisor had been patient about the accommodations Rachel needed for Echo, flexible scheduling to maintain his routine, occasional work from home, days where his anxiety spiked. But the regional animal control office was restructuring, requiring officers to rotate between counties and work unpredictable shifts. "I can't disrupt his stability," Rachel confided to Dr. Chun during Echo's checkup. "But I don't know how to make this work financially." Before the veterinarian could respond, his office manager knocked urgently on the exam room door. A German shepherd had just been brought in after being hit by a car. Severe injuries, no identification, no microchip. "We're short staff today," the manager explained apologetically. "Is there any chance?" Rachel hesitated, glancing at Echo, who was unusually calm in the clinical environment he had visited regularly. "I can't leave him alone. Bring him," Dr. Chin suggested. "Let's see how he responds." To everyone's surprise, Echo followed Rachel into the treatment area with minimal anxiety. As the team worked to stabilize the injured shepherd, Echo watched intently. From the corner, his crying softer than usual, almost questioning. When the critical moment passed and the injured dog stabilized, Rachel noticed something remarkable. Echo had moved closer to the exam table, his body language alert but not fearful. When the wounded shepherd regained consciousness and began whimpering in pain, Echo's own crying changed pitch, as if in sympathy. "He understands," whispered one of the technicians. "He knows his dog is suffering." The experience awakened something in both Rachel and Echo. Over the following weeks, Dr. Chin invited them to return during similar cases, always German shepherds initially, then gradually other breeds. Echo's presence had an unexpected calming effect on many traumatized dogs, his gentle crying seeming to communicate a shared understanding that human words couldn't convey. He's becoming a therapy dog in his own unique way, Dr. Chin observed as they watched. Echo lie near a recently rescued shepherd mix, both dogs communicating in soft whines, not despite his trauma, but because of it. The revelation coincided with a job opening at the clinic, a position coordinating their expanding rescue rehabilitation program. The role would allow Rachel to use her animal control experience while working regular hours in an environment that could accommodate Echo's needs. We need someone who understands both the system and the animals caught in it, Dr. Chin explained, officially offering her the position. And Echo's connection with our most traumatized cases is something we couldn't have anticipated. Like at home that evening, Rachel sat on the porch swing with Echo pressed against her side, his head in her lap. For the first time since his rescue, he had gone an entire day without crying once. You found your purpose, she whispered, stroking his ears, and you helped me remember mine. 1 year to the day after Echo's rescue, Rachel parked her car at the rural property where she'd first found him. The abandoned house had since been demolished, the land purchased by a local conservation group where Echo had once stood chained, and crying native wildflowers now bloomed in vibrant patches. This is where we began, Rachel told Echo as they walked the perimeter. Together, he stayed close to her side, alert, but calm, occasionally glancing up as if to confirm she was still there. They had both transformed over the past year. Rachel had flourished in her new role at the clinic, developing protocols for rehabilitating traumatized animals that were being adopted by shelters across the state. Echo, while still prone to anxiety and occasional crying, had become something of a local celebrity, the shepherd who helped other shepherds heal. Their daily routine now included visits to the recovery ward where Echo would lie quietly near freshly rescued dogs, his presence offering comfort that human hands couldn't provide. Most remarkably, he seemed to know which cases needed him most, gravitating toward the most fearful, the most broken. You recognize the pain because you've lived it, Rachel often told him during these sessions. That's your superpower. Today was special beyond the anniversary. After months of preparation and certification training, Echo was officially receiving his therapy dog, Vest. The ceremony at the clinic would be small, just staff and a few special guests, but significant, marking a journey that had once seemed impossible. As they completed their walk around the property, Rachel knelt beside Echo, taking his face gently between her hands. You made it, she whispered. Through all the tears, all the fear, all the pain, you found your way back to joy. Echo held her gaze steadily, his amber eyes clear and present. Then he did something that still felt miraculous. He leaned forward and gently licked her cheek, a gesture of affection that had emerged only in recent months. At the clinic that afternoon, Dr. Chin presented Echo with his therapy vest while staff members, who had witnessed his entire journey, applauded. As Rachel fastened the vest around his chest, she felt overwhelmed by how far they had come. When I first met Echo, he couldn't stop crying, she shared with the gathered group. Many people suggested his trauma was too deep, that he'd never recover enough to live a normal life. Her voice caught as she continued, but recovery doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's not about erasing the past, but finding purpose in it, as if understanding he was being discussed. Echo pressed against Rachel's leg, looking up at her with complete trust. He hadn't cried once all day, a milestone that no longer surprised Rachel, but still filled her with quiet joy. After the ceremony, they walked together to recovery ward, where a newly rescued German shepherd huddled fearfully in her kennel, too traumatized to respond to human comfort. Without prompting, Echo settled outside the kennel door, a calm, steady presence offering silent understanding. See that dog? Rachel overheard a technician explaining to a volunteer. He was once considered hopeless, just like this new girl. Now he helps others heal. As the frightened shepherd gradually inched toward Echo, drawn by his gentle energy, Rachel witnessed Once again, the power of their shared journey. Echo had transformed from victim to healer, his past suffering becoming a bridge to others still trapped in their pain. Sometimes the ones who've been most broken, Rachel murmured, watching the two shepherds connect, become the strongest at the mended places. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories and help us spread messages of courage and hope. Remember that healing is possible even from the deepest wounds.